Man, oh man, Mike Conley continues to be one of the most underrated guards in the NBA, and you guys know I've always been a Mike Conley fan. I want to hear your thoughts down below. Where do you want Mike Conley to go? And Mike Conley's a guy who only played 28.6 minutes a night last year. Yes, he's 34 years old at this point, but he's still, over the last 2 years, been basically a 41% three-point shooter, averaging 1.5 steals, about at least 5 assists, and about 14 to 15 points a night. And he's still an effective player. I mean, the last 3 years he's been about a 14 to 15 player a night, shooting close to 40% from three, and just being a very hyper efficient basketball player. But he is a guy who has averaged 20 points per game multiple times, and also a guy who has averaged almost 7 assists a night, being one of the, arguably, I think in his prime, Mike Conley was like the 5th best point guard in the entire NBA. And today I want to talk about where he could be traded. Shout out to a few websites that I'm using as influence for some trades, which is basketballnews.com is one of them. The other one is kslsports.com and hoopshype.com. Just a couple websites to gather information from, and as a journalism major, I just think it's always right to attribute and source the information you're getting, and just keep the world go around. Now look, at this point, there's a few teams that Mike Conley could go to. Obviously, the first one, let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks, as this team lost Jalen Brunson. And Tim Hardaway's contract would be enough, to center it around. And yes, the Mavs owe a first-round pick to the Knicks that you assume would convey this year, but that's off the table. And will they maybe package Josh Green and Tim Hardaway Jr. and send it over? Because you could also do, that's something that could happen. Or you could hit up the Minnesota Timberwolves and be like, you want a Conley D'Angelo Russell swap? I doubt that happened, because I don't think Utah wants D'Angelo Russell. I think Minnesota would definitely be like, oh, Mike Conley? Yeah, take D.O. Okay, at least Mike Conley, we know where we're getting. We're not going to have the guy choke in the playoffs. Now, the Jazz are hard cap, because I think it's definitely interesting, and Conley going to the Lakers would be harder than easier, in my opinion, as there's been various teams, because I've said the Lakers' best deal for the Jazz would be Bojan Bogdanovic, Jordan Clarkson, and Malik Beasley in a three-player package for Russell Westbrook and 2 first-round picks. But for me, I sit here and Mike Conley's team doesn't fit the roster, what they're doing. So for me, when I look at what teams could trade for Conley, I think right now in my head, the best option is obviously Dallas, because that's where he could go off. And he's got basically, 2 years left on his deal, but next year's only $14 million is guaranteed. So you would save about $10 million for cutting him. Though Conley's still a good player, his value has dropped in the last 12 months. He's a steady veteran, reliable floor spacer, good defender. And like I said, Mavericks could package Davis Bertans, Josh Green in a first-round pick, or they could send Tim Hardaway Jr. The Miami Heat could package Duncan Robinson and a few players. The Washington Wizards, it would become a little bit harder for them to get him, as I don't really think they have the cap room to do it there. That one's going to be a little bit more difficult. And obviously, Lakers are an ideal spot. I think right now in my head, Dallas is awesome. Miami would be awesome. The Pelicans and Wizards would be cool, but it's too hard to make the money work. Same thing with the Portland Trailblazers. You want to make the money work, but it might be a little too hard right there. So then when you keep scouring through the NBA marketplace and you're just like, all right, where could Mike Conley go? I mean, if he doesn't get traded, he's definitely a buyout candidate, just because I can't see him, sticking on this team. But that's where I want to hear your thoughts, okay? And I think it's definitely an interesting situation that we've been put in, because Mike Conley is a good basketball player. By all means, I have never had a problem with Mike Conley. I think he's a fun guy to watch. Now, there is a problem when it comes down to the fact that his value has sunken. a lot, and hopefully that doesn't dissuade people from wanting to acquire him. Or some people might just be thinking, hey, I think he's going to be available in the, you know, through the buyout, which that makes sense. If that's your argument on not picking him up right now because you think you can buy him out, go for it. Okay, that's a good belief system. But besides that, I think people who are, you know, discounting themselves from our man Mike Conley because of his age are being fucking stupid. But that's basically it. Peace out.